So, Donald Trump tried to bully India. He slapped 50% tariffs on them. He lied about phone calls. He made up war stories. He threatened 250% tariffs. And then everything started falling apart. Not for India, for Trump. This is Echoes of the Net, where we expose what the mainstream media is too afraid to tell you. Today, we are diving into the complete, unfiltered truth behind Trump's tariff war on India, a saga that just got exponentially more complicated. Because now there is a Supreme Court case that could invalidate all of Trump's tariffs. Trump's suddenly calling Modi his friend and planning a 2026 India visit. India's Russian oil imports actually increased in October, and trade deal negotiations are in very serious discussions. This isn't just politics anymore. This is geopolitical warfare disguised as trade negotiations. So buckle up because we are about to expose exactly what's really happening behind closed doors. Let me hit you with something Trump probably doesn't want you to know. On November 5, 2025, just 4 days ago, the United States Supreme Court heard oral arguments in a case that could literally invalidate every single tariff Trump has imposed. Not just on India, on everyone. This case is called Trump versus VOS sections, and it's basically asking one simple question: does Donald Trump even have the legal authority to impose tariffs in the first place? Here is the backstory. In May 2025, a lower court in New York ruled that Trump did not have the authority to impose tariffs using something called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which is IEEPA. IEEPA is a 1977 law designed for genuine national emergencies like wars, terrorism, natural disasters. It was meant to give the president emergency powers when the nation is under threat. Trump's interpretation: a trade deficit is a national emergency. Therefore, I can impose 50% tariffs on everyone. Two federal courts already said no. But Trump appealed to the Supreme Court, and last week the justices heard arguments from both sides. And here is the critical part: both conservative and liberal justices seem deeply skeptical of Trump's argument. Justice Amy Coney Barrett, appointed by Trump himself, asked pointed questions about whether IEEPA actually authorizes tariffs. Justice Sonia Sotomayor expressed doubt that Congress intended IEEPA to be used this way. Even the typically conservative justices seem unconvinced. Indian American attorney Neil Katyal, representing small businesses challenging the tariffs, argued that Trump was using a national security law meant for actual emergencies to conduct trade policy. He presented the option of prospective relief, meaning even if the court rules now, existing tariffs might not need to be immediately refunded. But here is the kicker: if the court rules against Trump, the federal government could be forced to refund over $88 billion in tariffs already collected. That's not just India, that's China, Canada, Mexico, and everyone. And all trade deals based on IEEPA tariffs, including the 10-year India defense deal that's supposed to be a framework for normalized relations, would be thrown into legal limbo. Trump wrote on Truth Social that this case is one of the most important in the history of the country. Translation: he knows he could lose big. The Supreme Court hasn't announced a decision yet, but analysts are saying that the odds of Trump losing are rising rapidly. And do you know what happens if Trump loses? Chaos, economic uncertainty, and India suddenly has massive leverage to renegotiate the entire trade arrangement. Okay, so here where it gets really interesting. On November 6, 2025, Trump stood in front of reporters and said once again that India has largely stopped buying oil from Russia. He said Modi largely stopped buying from Russia. Prime Minister Modi is a great man. He repeated this lie for what? The 60th time now? And the White House media machine went into overdrive. Press Secretary Caroline Levitt said Trump has very serious discussions with India and that he feels very strongly about the India US relationship. It sounded so diplomatic, so reasonable, so false. Because here's what the data actually shows. On November 3, 2025, Reuters released shipping data from analytics firm Kepler. India's Russian oil imports in October 2025 1.48 million barrels per day. In September, it's 1.44 million BPD. That's a monthly increase. India is buying more Russian oil, not less. But wait, it gets better. Kepler analyst Sumit Ritolia predicted that Russian oil imports would remain steady through November 21, then potentially decline due to US sanctions on Russian oil companies. The translation being any future reduction isn't because of tariffs or Trump's jawboning. It's because of new US sanctions on Russian oil suppliers that just took effect. Even more interesting, India also starting buying a record amount of US oil in October. The US became India's fourth largest oil supplier in September, surpassing the UAE for the first time since March 2021. India imported 568,000 barrels per day from the US in September, a historic high. October figures are similar, projected at 450,000 to 500,000 BPD. But here is the crucial part. This wasn't because of Trump's tariff threats. Kepler analyst Sumit Ritolia explained these shipments were likely arranged prior to the recent US sanctions, considering the 45 to 55-day transit time. This suggests that the increase is not solely driven by sanctions but is indicative of India's ongoing efforts to diversify its energy sources. Translation: India was already planning to diversify. They weren't doing it because Trump threatened them. In fact, India refiners like Reliance Industries, Mangalore Refinery, and HPCL Mittal Energy have stopped buying Russian oil, but not because of Trump. They stopped because of new US sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil that make it logistically difficult. So, the actual sequence of events was number 1, Trump imposed 50% tariffs claiming India was funding Russia. Number 2, India maintained Russian oil purchases, proving tariffs didn't work. Number 3, Trump claimed victory anyway, saying Modi largely stopped buying Russian oil. Number 4, US imposed additional sanctions on Russian suppliers. Number 5, Indian refiners stopped buying because of sanctions, not tariffs. And number 6, Trump takes credit for something he didn't cause. This is gaslighting at a geopolitical level. And India's MEA, they are already publicly called Trump out on this. MEA spokesperson Randhir Jaiswal stated on November 6, India's energy procurement strategy is independent and driven by practical concerns rather than political alignment. In other words, we don't care what Trump says, we make our own decisions. Here's what's fascinating. For 3 months, Trump has been imposing 50% tariffs, lying about phone calls, making up war stories, publicly insulting India's economy, claiming Modi promised things Modi never promised. And then, on November 6, everything suddenly changed. Trump called Modi a great man and a friend multiple times. He said, Modi wants me to go there and that they speak regularly. He hinted at a 2026 India visit, possibly for the Quad summit that India is hosting. He said trade talks are going good. The White House press office emphasized Trump's strong personal connection with Modi and said the US views the partnership with India as critical for regional and global stability. US Ambassador to India, Sergio Gore, has been instrumental in advancing bilateral negotiations. So, what changed? Here is my theory, and it's based on cold hard geopolitical logic. Theory number one: the Supreme Court case scared him. Trump realizes that his entire tariff strategy could be struck down by the Supreme Court. All of it. The tariffs on India, China, Mexico, Canada, all potentially invalidated. If that happens, Trump's big win in trade negotiations disappears overnight. So, what's plan B? Make nice with India, offer concessions, get a deal in place before the Supreme Court rules. That way, even if the Supreme Court strikes down IEEPA tariffs, Trump can claim he negotiated a historic deal with India that wasn't based on tariffs. Theory number two: the Quad anxiety. Trump wants to maintain American influence in the Indo Pacific as a counterweight to China. The Quad is critical for this, but India has shown it won't be pushed around. India is buying Russian oil, India is getting closer to Russia and China. India is ignoring Trump's demands. Trump needs India to believe that America values the relationship, so he is suddenly being nice. Theory number three: November trade deal deadline. Both India and the US committed to trying to finalize a trade deal by the end of November 2025. That's less than 3 weeks away. Trump wants to announce a victory before the year ends. Getting a deal with India would be good optics before the midterms campaign kicks into overdrive. So suddenly, all the hostility vanishes. Modi is a great man. India is a friend. Trade talks are very serious. Theory number four: the real leverage shift. Here is the uncomfortable truth for Trump: India doesn't need this deal as much as Trump does. India's economy is growing at 6 to 7% annually, tariffs or not. Indian exports to the US dropped 37.5% due to tariffs, but India has other markets. Trump, meanwhile, is facing Supreme Court challenge threatening all his tariffs, domestic inflation from tariffs hitting American consumers, midterm pressure to show trade deal wins, strategic need to keep India in the Quad. Modi can literally just wait Trump out, and wait him out he did. Now Trump is begging for a photo opportunity, a deal, a visit to India. The strategic truth behind this is Trump isn't changing his tone because he suddenly likes Modi. He's changing it because India called his bluff and won. And now, with the Supreme Court case looming, Trump needs a win more than India needs concessions. On November 6, 2025, Niti Aayog chief Amitabh Kant said, hopefully by end of month we may hear some news about a trade deal update. Both India and the US have confirmed they are trying to finalize a first tranche of a broader trade agreement by November 30. The question is, what will this deal actually contain? What India is offering, number one, is increased purchases of US energy products, but not committing to abandon Russian oil. Number two, opening agriculture markets, buying US corn for biofuel programs. Number three, boosting defense procurement, more military equipment. And number four, diversifying oil sources, which they are already doing anyway. What India is not offering is number one, immediate cessation of Russian oil imports. Number two, acceptance of secondary sanctions. Number three, letting the US dictate energy policy. And number four, changing strategic autonomy. What India wants in return is number one, tariffs reduced from 50 to 15%. Number two, removal of 25% penalty tariff tied to Russian oil. And number three, long term certainty, not annual tariff renegotiations. Here is the catch: even if this deal gets signed, it might be illegally imposed anyway. Because if the Supreme Court rules against Trump's IEEPA tariffs, the entire legal basis for the tariffs disappears. So imagine this scenario: India and the US sign a trade deal on November 30, 2025. Trump announces a historic victory with India. By January 2026, the Supreme Court rules that IEEPA tariffs are unconstitutional. Suddenly, Trump is forced to refund 88 billion US dollars in tariffs to importers. The legal foundation for the entire trade deal crumbles. India keeps all the benefits they got from their concessions, but the US is obligated to refund tariffs. That would be complicated. But here is the geopolitical reality: India doesn't care about the legal details, they care about practical outcomes. If the tariffs come down, whether through negotiation or Supreme Court ruling, they win. If Trump visits India in 2026 as a friend instead of a bully, that's a diplomatic win. If the trade deal lets India keep buying Russian oil while getting tariff reductions, that's a strategic win. India is playing the long game. Trump is playing for headlines. Now, let's talk about Trump's proposed 2026 visit to India. On the surface, it sounds nice. Presidents visit allied countries all the time. But in geopolitical terms, this is massive. Why? Because Trump is essentially acknowledging defeat. Here's what an India visit by Trump signals: to India, I respect you, you stood your ground, I'm coming to your country as a guest, which means you have the upper hand. To China, see, America is committed to the Indo Pacific. We are not abandoning this region to you. To the US domestic audience, look, I negotiated a deal with India. Trade war victory. To the world, America values strategic partnerships over economic coercion. Trump visiting India, especially if it's for the Quad summit, is basically Trump admitting that his tariff strategy didn't work the way he hoped. If tariffs had won, Trump could demand India come to Washington. Instead, Trump is going to India. That's a role reversal that signals who really holds the power in this relationship. And here is the kicker: Trump probably wants to time this visit right before the 2026 midterm elections. A presidential visit to a major ally, photos with Modi, headlines about strengthening partnerships, perfect midterm campaign material. But Modi won't let that be the narrative. Modi will frame it as Trump finally respecting India's sovereignty and strategic autonomy. Modi will use the visit to announce defense deals, energy partnerships, and technology cooperation. Modi will use Trump's presence to legitimize India's independent foreign policy. Trump thinks he's coming to claim victory, but Modi will frame it as India's winning the respect it deserved all along. Okay, so let's zoom way out because this entire saga is really about one fundamental question: can America still dictate terms to the world? For decades, the answer was yes. America had the biggest economy, the biggest military, and the political leverage to force other countries into compliance. But something's changed, not because America got weaker, but because the rest of the world got stronger. India's economy is now $3.7 trillion. It's the world's fastest growing major economy. It's a nuclear power. It has 1.4 billion people. Most importantly, India has options. If America won't trade fairly, India can turn to Russia, or the Middle East, or the Southeast Asia, or China. And Trump's tariff strategy proved something crucial: economic coercion doesn't work on countries that can survive without you. India absorbed a 37.5% collapse in exports to the US. Their economy kept growing. India maintained Russian oil purchases despite threats. The war didn't end. India signed a defense deal with America while keeping Russian energy ties. Both things happened simultaneously. This is strategic autonomy in action. And China is watching very carefully because if India can resist US pressure, so can any other country. This fundamentally undermines Trump's ability to leverage tariffs as a geopolitical tool. Here's what really happened. The old model, which is pre 2025, where America threatens tariffs, countries comply, America gets concessions. The new model, post Trump India failure, is America threatens tariffs, countries wait it out, US Supreme Court challenges the tariffs, countries negotiate from position of strength. India just proved that the old model is broken, and that's going to change global diplomacy for years. We don't know yet when the Supreme Court will rule on the IEEPA tariff case. But when they do, three possible outcomes are possible. Outcome number one, Trump wins with a 20% probability. The court rules that IEEPA does authorize tariffs. Trump's tariffs are legal, but this basically destroys IEEPA's original purpose and grants enormous emergency power to any future president. Outcome number two, Trump loses prospective relief only, which has a 50% probability. The court rules IEEPA doesn't authorize tariffs, but only applies going forward. Existing tariffs stay in place, but Trump can't impose new IEEPA tariffs. The $88 billion stays collected, but future deals must use different legal authority. Outcome number three, Trump loses full refund required, which has a 30% probability. The court rules IEEPA doesn't authorize tariffs and orders the federal government to refund all $88 billion already collected. Economic chaos ensues. Trade deals based on these tariffs are thrown into legal limbo. If outcome 3 happens, India could potentially number 1 keep all the benefits from any trade deal negotiated under the threat of IEEPA tariffs. Number 2, claim the legal basis for those threats was unconstitutional. And number 3, renegotiate from an even stronger position. That would be extraordinary for India. And here is the thing, every country will be watching this ruling. If Trump loses, every country suddenly has leverage to renegotiate their trade deals with America. That's why Trump's Supreme Court case might be the most consequential thing happening right now, and nobody's talking about it. So, here's the complete truth about Trump's tariff war on India. Trump thought he could bully India into submission. India said no. Trump threatened 50% tariffs. India maintained Russian oil purchases and signed a defense deal. Trump claimed victory based on lies. India called him out. Trump imposed tariffs on national emergency grounds. The Supreme Court called them unconstitutional. And now Trump is suddenly visiting India as a friend to try to salvage some kind of deal before the legal foundation of his entire strategy collapses. This isn't just a story about trade. This is a story about the end of American unilateral power. India proved that you don't need to match American military might or economic size to win. You just need patience, strategic clarity, and the willingness to call a bluff. The Supreme Court case could validate India's stance by striking down Trump's legal authority. A November trade deal would let India keep Russian oil while getting tariff relief. A 2026 Trump visit would be Trump essentially admitting he was wrong. And the world is watching because if America can't force India into compliance, who can they force into compliance anymore? That's the real story here. Not the tariffs, not the oil, but a fundamental shift in global power dynamics. America didn't lose its strength, but the world lost its fear. And that changed everything. This has been Echoes of the Net. I'm your host, and until next time, stay curious, stay informed, stay defined. Because the revolution isn't coming from politicians or media, it's coming from people who refuse to believe the lies.